Hey everyone, are we ready to get started?
Yes.
Alright, good afternoon everyone. Today we are going to talk about a short story titled Shimenawa that is written by Naoki Kumagay. Before we start, can we have a little information about the author?
Of course, Naika Kumagay has a background in journalism, publicity, screenwriting, and filmmaking. She's been awarded the Canadian Film Centre Screenwriting Prize, has been published in Rice Paper and Event Magazine, and won Room Magazine non-fiction contest in 2014.
Thank you, Miss Nato. Now, Miss Bailen, why don't you go ahead and tell us the summary of the story?
So, in the Shinto religion, twists of sacred rice through rope called Shimenawa are used to symbolize ritual purifications and to ward off evil spirits. The Shimenawa is hung over the doors of temples, homes, or building sites after they have been purified. Kazuya had used a piece of rice or rope to end his life, and Kazuya was running for city council. The narrator's mother told her that her grandmother had called them with the news that early Tuesday morning, September 1988, her father didn't go to the funeral, and she suddenly realized that death doesn't necessarily bring people together. It can lift the veil and reveal how far apart you are. And this statement is very important that it can grow the way people think when someone dies. She only met Uncle Kazuya once in Ishikari. When she was 10, Kazuya was a full of life, a man to be feared, and he was generous, oppressive, a thief, and also a bully and a giant. They were born in Japan at the end of Second World War. They grew up poor, married, immigrated to Canada. The narrator's father always follows their father's rule. A human only speaks 3 words a day. But Kazuya broke it in his last words. After hearing of Kazuya's suicide, she contemplated rope in all its variations. This line is very important, and this gives a hint to the last part when she called her father. At the paragraph number 10, corruption was so common that people didn't particularly seem to be outraged by it in Japan politics in Hokkaido. She's been wondering why her uncle did it, and Uncle Kazuya had been a popular councilman in his community. He probably could have gone on unscathed, been forgiven if forgiveness was even necessary. You must commit suicide at the height of your beauty. This is something the Japanese writer Yukio Mishima believed when he committed seppuku in a government office. Then Brother Jiro was forced, sitting at the dinner. He stuffed another onigiri in his mouth, bits of rice falling, and Kazuya disciplined her brother Jiro. He wants Jiro to eat properly and learn to be a man. He tied Jiro to a large oak tree, and the narrator's mother never forgave her uncle. On this part, you can actually see that this line gives a hint to the rope Kazuya used to end his life. And she was living in Toronto when the tsunami hit it. His wondering why her father talked to her on the phone because he usually doesn't talk too much like her uncle. He's speaking in a voice she never heard, and the narrator promised to call her father. She hung up and called because she was frightened to take the chance of being ignored or discarded. This last part is very meaningful. Then she was really scared that her father will attempt purification like what her uncle did.
Thank you, Ms. Bailen. Your summarization is really good as it talks and explains clearly the significance of those events in the story. It is brief but very precise.
Okay, the summary is very great. Everything that happened in the story was briefly discussed.
All right, thank you for that meaningful summarization, Ms. Bailen. Now that we've listened to the summarization of the story, I would like to ask you some questions. In the story, it was mentioned by the narrator that death doesn't necessarily bring people together, but it can show how far apart they are with one another. Do you agree with this statement? Why or why not?
I actually agree to this statement. That doesn't necessarily bring people together. It can lift the veil and reveal how far apart you or they are.
I also agree with the statement of Bailen because the death of a person can show his relationship with other people. You can see it with their reaction. You can see that they will be either sad or that they will either be apathetic or just brush it off or just be emotionless towards it.
It's quite refreshing how we have different take on the statement and hearing your reasons are really great. Now, the story is mainly about Kazuya, which is the narrator's uncle. How did the narrator's family, especially her father, mourn about the death of Kazuya?
The narrator's father didn't go to the funeral kasi karaniwan sa mga lalaki is strong and emotionless. And naniniwala sila na a real man only speaks 3 words a day.
Okay, I just want to add that it was not actually mentioned or really explained in the story. So I think we could form assumptions about it. The narrator shared that her father was emotionless when he said the passing of his brother to his family. And he didn't even go to the funeral. He didn't show empathy, sadness, or grief. So I think he has little to no care about Kazuya, maybe because of some reasons.
Okay, we know that the narrator's father is quite emotionless throughout the story except for the end. Do you think that the way the narrator's father acted in the death of his brother has something to do with him following his father's credo? Why do you say so?
I think it is because Kazuya broke it. I think the relationship was broken due to that.
I think for his her father was afraid of his mother, the way her mother treated Kazuya when he did not follow his father's credo.
Now, in paragraph 4, it was mentioned that the narrator's parents have migrated to Canada. How does the migration of the narrator's family affected her identity, and do you think it is one of the reason why she barely knows his uncle?
Migration really affects the relationship towards people you left with. So, pag hindi ka doon nakatira, is hindi mo alam yung culture nila, ganon, and yun.
I think also since hindi sila nag-spend time much together, and since they were far away together, far away from each other, the narrator did not get to know Uncle Kazuya very well.
As for me, based on my understanding, because of the migration, the narrator experienced differently, unlike those of her relatives in Japan. And due to the distance between them, the narrator didn't actually know much about her family in Japan. So the narrator or the main character only knows little about Uncle.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peralta. I'm glad that you've shared those answers. Now in the story, the narrator was told that Kazuya tied Jiro, her little brother, to an oak tree as a punishment because he wasn't eating his dinner properly. Now, this is a form of physical punishment, and these are heavily practiced back in the day, especially in Asian countries like Japan. I think nowadays it was not practiced, and personally, this type of punishment is unacceptable, especially for kids. Kids don't immediately understand the connection between their attitude and the physical punishment. So doing this discipline doesn't necessarily do anything. They will only feel the pain, and this could actually result to mental health problems. However, I am intrigued by your stand. Do you think that the way Kazuya disciplined Jiro acceptable because he's not eating his dinner properly? Why or why not?
I think it is very unacceptable since the things that Kazuya did to Jiro might instill trauma onto him and might scar him for the rest of his life.
I think it is acceptable if Jiro knows what he's doing, but he's just for that time. And ang ginawa nila is force discipline. So, hindi siya applicable sa mga batang hindi pa alam yung ano yung ginagawa nila. Like, parang very aggressive pa sila sa mga ginagawa nila.
Alright, it's amazing how we can share and take our stand regarding this question. Does anyone want to add something?
Yes, I do. Although it may appear that the way Uncle Kazuya lecture Jiro is reasonable, it is still unacceptable due to the fact that it may cause physical or even mental trauma for a child that young. Jiro is only 4 years old when that happened, and playing with your food is common to those who are at a very young age, since they only know how to play and fool around. So in any other way, the way of lecturing of Uncle Kazuya to Jiro is unacceptable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peralta. Now we know that the title of the short story is Shimenawa. It was explained in the story that Shimenawa are twists of sacred rice straw ropes that are used to symbolize ritual, purification, and to ward off evil spirits. These are hung over the doors of temples, homes, or building sites after they have been purified. The rope is also used to encircle objects that are considered holy, such as trees or rocks.
Now, in paragraph 11 and 13, it was mentioned that Kazuya used a piece of twisted rice straw to hang himself and tie Jiro on the oak tree. What do you think is the reason of Kazuya used a piece of rice straw or Kazuya to end his life and punish his nephew?
As for me, I think Kazuya used the Shimenawa to hang himself as a form of purification, and I think for me that he used the Shimenawa to tie Jiro on a tree because, like the story said, that that Shimenawas are tied to things that are holy or that have a high like spiritual value, like trees or rocks. So this might be the reason why Uncle Kazuya tied Jiro to the tree, so that he may also be influenced by the energy that the tree.
Additional to that, I think he used Shimenawa to purify and to ward off evil spirits. And sabi dun sa story is, Shimenawa are used to symbolize nga ritual purifications and to ward off evil spirits.
Okay, it's pretty cool that we have different opinions and interpretation regarding his reason of killing himself.
So, okay, just a follow-up question. What do you think is the main reason why Kazuya committed suicide? Personally, I think the note can actually lead us to why he committed suicide. It was mentioned in the story that Kazuya is a popular councilman in his community, and I think that even though corruption is very common in Hokkaido, he was still scared when people knew about his wrongdoing, so he committed suicide.
I also think that the reason why Uncle Kazuya committed suicide is because his corruption was found out, as what Elaine said. Since it said that he was found out, it is possible that his corruption was found out.
Okay, our answers are quite interesting. Now we all know that the story is titled Shimenawa. Why do you think it was titled as Shimenawa, not Death or Uncle Kazuya? Personally, I believe that the story titled Shimenawa because the story revolves around Kazuya's death. That we all know Kazuya's used Shimenawa or twist of sacred rice straw rope to hang himself and to tie Jiro on the oak.
I think the reason why the story is titled Shimenawa is because of its prevalence in the story. As we see when Uncle Kazuya tied Jiro up on the tree with Shimenawa.
Thank you. Those are very good reasons. Thank you for sharing your answers and own interpretations. Now, Mr. Uy, would you mind to tell us the connections you found between the story and the real world?
Yes, definitely. So during the story, I found, so as we know, Uncle Kazuya committed suicide for many reasons, as the story implies. But one of the reasons that was implied was because his corruption was found out when he bribed many people when he was running for a position in city council. I think this story is very similar to a story I heard of when a company called Enron was found for its corruption. One of the higher up executives who was on the plan for the corruption was he basically quit the company, sold off the stocks, and then basically ran away. Is there anyone who wants to add something?
I want to add something po. So, one of the connector that I have noticed is about the forced disciplining, especially to what did his uncle do to Jiro when they were eating, when he tied Jiro into a tree. So, that is common in today, in the present time, because some of the students are experiencing forced disciplining. Not all of them, but just some of the students.
All right, thank you, Mr. Uy and Mr. De La Rosa for those connections. Now, can we please have Mr. De La Rosa and Mr. Peralta for Luminary Literary? Please tell us the passages and quotations you've compiled from the story.
My pleasure, Miss Elaine. So, one of the quote that I've found is, "I'm found out. It's too late. Help." So, what do you think is the meaning of the note that her uncle Kazuya left?
I think it has something to do with politics since Kazuya is a councilman in his community. And it was the note that Kazuya left when he committed suicide. So I think it has something to do with his actions or doings while he was a councilman.
Thank you for that, Miss Elaine. So another one is another quote that I found is when her grandmother asked the question, "Do you eat sushi in Canada? And it would be nice if you married a Japanese boy someday." Why do you think her grandmother asked her those questions?
Actually, the narrator was born in Japan, and the grandmother would think that it's nice to marry someone of the same nationality as her. Kasi since pinanganak nga siya sa Japan and nag-migrate siya, hindi niya alam yung culture ng iniwan niyang bansa.
Okay, next to our third quotation.
As for our third quotation, this is a quote that came from the narrator's mother. He went door to door and bribed people so they'd vote for him. He was running for city council. He was an idiot. What did you notice about anything in the quote?
I noticed that the mother of the narrator is mad maybe because she is against that Kazuya's running as city councilor.
For the last quote, "You must commit suicide at the height of your beauty," said by Yukio Mishima, who committed suicide at the age of 45. Do you see any significance from the quotation to the story itself?
I think its significance is the story that when it was said, it was in the part where they were talking about the reason why Kazuya committed suicide. It is implied to be one of the reasons why Kazuya committed suicide is because he committed suicide at the age of 52. It is implied that he was past his beauty or that he was getting older, and that is why he committed suicide.
Okay, that's a very nice answer. And that is all for the quotes.
Thank you, Mr. De La Rosa and Mr. Peralta.
Thank you, everyone. Now we are close to the end. Thank you, everyone, for this effective discussion. This certainly helps our understanding regarding the story Shimenawa. I'm Elaine During, and I played the role of a discussion director.
I'm Krisha May Inato, played a role as discussion director.
My name is Glenn Wilson Piur, and I have the role of the connector.
I am Princess Aidaniela Sambaylan. I am the summarizer.
I am Nathaniel De La Rosa. I played the role of literary luminary.
And I'm Carl Peralta, and I also played the role of literary luminary.